more convenient if they can't make it at noon. But I am thrilled to be here. And another entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur in West Michigan, running this show.
You know, Jim, we're having a lot of fun at the store. And I noticed when you were showing me on your computer that you had a graphic or an image that was from a gun shop somewhere out in southwestern America that said if you voted for Obama, you're not responsible enough to buy a gun from that guy. Is that what I saw?
It might have been. I am doing this compulsive surfing, but
I liked it.
I would agree. It would be. It does seem odd if you do care about owning a gun yourself, and in fact you voted for President Obama. That's an incongruity that maybe psychologists could clear up in some way.
Yeah, it would be like if a fellow was trying to burst forward with great opportunities and voted for a big bag of entitlements instead. I'd have a tough time understanding the rationale behind that.
Well, we were having a discussion off air, all three of us, Oscar and you and I, about why folks seem to be supporting what the three of us agree is unsupportable. And I think it is a belief that you can continue to get free phones and free breakfast, lunch, and dinner for your child, and discounted, if not free housing and free health care and free pickup for senior people and other people who want to have free transportation and free education and on and on and on. And there's just a belief, and maybe it's an ignorance, but there's a belief that it can all continue on no matter forever. Certainly our friends in Europe, in Detroit, in Muskegon Heights, seem to have that belief because nobody's interested at all in changing the direction. No,
you're absolutely right, Jim. It's kind of a fascinating thing because it's almost like there's two trains of mental thought going on. The one that will quip or make light, yeah, we're doomed and it's gloom and doom. But the actual exercise of what people are doing seems based on the perception that what we have, we will always have. And that, so to me, I say we're a victim of our great success, but the too big to fail kind of mentality. And so people will, to me, it's a fascinating thing to think that what is will always be, even when we're sitting here at somewhere between 16 trillion and 80 trillion, depending on who's telling the story, a lot of dough that we owe to a lot of people that frankly aren't our friends. And to think that is a sustainable formula for a nation like the United States is just insane to me.
And for the folks that the term sustainability is an almost religious word. Apparently, ecological sustainability is important, but fiscal and financial sustainability is somehow not important. I agree with you. I don't know why we have this Pollyanna view, but I always go back. I'm a historian. I know you do. You're big in history also, but you've got to look. For instance, just take the French, who had any number of wars in the 1800s, some of which were with the Germans. They were invaded in the early part of the 1900s in World War I, and yet almost totally disarmed. And again, after the war to end all wars, apparently you put that title on it. And geez, what a shocker! And the World War II started, and they got rolled over again. So the capacity of the human mind to believe in things that truly cannot come true is astounding sometimes and saddening.
To me, one of the things that we did touch on, in fact, on our phone call when we first talked, Jim, was we talked about education and local control versus federal or national control. And I wrote the other day, I said, poor education and entitlements are not separate issues. And so I think most people would if they pause and actually look at what's going on in our educational arena, will agree that there's some problems. And we can get it, once you dial into the details, you can certainly find room for debate. But the overall product, at least from my vantage, is that the average person graduating from what's 13 years of public education, if you throw in kindergarten, has no marketable skills at all. And so
I agree 100%.
Yeah, and then if you say, wait a minute, in Michigan at least, the last time I saw the numbers, only 25% of the high school graduates would go on to graduate from a higher education. And you say, wait, that means 75% literally will spend, as I see the old thing that says the average youth is leaving home at 26 or 27 years old. And frankly, that goes to my point, because if they leave high school with no marketable skills, it takes them that long to find out who and what they are and where they're going. And so the question is, I know that you've attended a lot of school board meetings, and I've certainly went to a few in my time. But Jim, from your vantage, because you've with eyes on Muskegon, you're pretty dialed into what's going on locally. What do you see in the educational arena as the chief problem?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. I would just come up with just maybe a little interpretation that says it's even worse, because you said that 25% of the high school graduates ultimately graduate from college. That's high school graduates. How many kids who enter into the high school realm actually do graduate? So the numbers are even worse than what you say. And I agree that the focus, this I believe it's a scam to encourage young people who really have no reason to be in college, no reason to borrow money to go in and, as you said, 75% or better, never get the degree or any degree that they were looking to get. I think that's a tragedy. I think it's a scandal that we would encourage these young people to take on this debt when it's very clear that it's going to be an almost worthless, a valueless investment. But I think it goes back even before that, and it's, to me, it's the MEAP scores. When you look at the fourth graders and the sixth graders and the eighth graders, and you look at the number of young people who've not developed the basic skills, forget college, I'm talking reading, writing, arithmetic. They've not developed those basic skills, and you can talk to employers. And even today, college graduates, their writing skills just are abysmal. And I can assure you, any number of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of young college graduates who have sent in resumes with some of the basic spelling errors, the not knowing the difference between two, and two, and so on, have not gotten jobs just because of that basic situation. But when we have young people that can't read, can't write a paragraph, their arithmetic skills are almost non-existent. That's a serious problem. I'd love to see them learning about history and economics and government and any number of other things, social studies and all that. But we've got far too many young people that can't do even the basics. You know, it's fascinating, Jim. Years ago, back in the 80s, I owned a restaurant. And when I first bought the restaurant, had my father and stepmother, the three of us bought in, and we had a really quaint, old-fashioned mechanical cash register. Oh, gosh, yes.
I'm telling you, we were really excited about what this great novelty we could keep a part of yesteryear, except for none of the employees could operate it because it demanded that you knew basic math, addition and subtraction. And we're talking about the higher end of the academic high school and shortly after group. And I was pretty young at the time. I was amazed. So anyway, we went out, we got a new cash register. So much for the old era, that was gone. We got a new register, but the register that we had didn't tell you change. So if the person's bill was $15.72 and he gave a 20, how much change do you give? And that turned into a train wreck. We ended up upgrading to an even newer register system that said you put the 20 in and here's what the change is. And we still had every single day shortages because people couldn't make the change, even with the computer telling you what the change will be. Now, that was 20-some years ago, and I think they say a generation lasts, so 20 to 25 years is what a generation is. And so nowadays, when I quip that we've got a poor education problem, people, well, recently I had a fairly, I don't want to say heated debate, a passionate debate with a local teacher in the shop, typical gun shop talk. Him and I agreed on almost every possible issue there was to agree on, except for education. We didn't agree on that at all, and I think the difference was his agenda was money, and mine was a product. And now his defense of his education, of the process and the product, was to quip. He said, now, if you were building cars or widgets or guns, and we gave you raw material that was inferior, we wouldn't expect you to come up with a superior product. And I got to tell you that. I stood back for a minute, and I thought about that quite a ways after that dialogue ended. I was aghast at his appraisal of the American citizen, frankly. But then again, like I do almost every show, as I have to quote, I'm not a big Abe fan, but Abe Lincoln said it best when he said the philosophy of the classroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. And I've never heard a truer statement, and I think the progressives were listening when he said it, and they embarked on a mission that conservatives and classical liberals have not been willing to pay the price on, meaning dig in for the long haul and take education back. That's my view.
Well, I love that comment from Abe Lincoln. I had not heard it, and I agree with you that it's true. I would like to just add this, because his response just shows the lack of any type of invention, I guess you'd call it, on behalf of the education establishment. When you complain about the quality of the children, in other words, the quality of the product that these very, very well-paid and well-compensated folks in our education establishment get, their response, which it isn't even logical, their response is, well, yes, we are putting out poorly educated children, but it's not our fault because we're getting it's the parents' fault or whatever. Now, think about it. If, in fact, you went to an airliner company and you said, I'm going to go take a flight, and the flights were crashing, and they said, well, wait a minute, it's not our fault. We've got all these hijackers and drunk pilots, and our engines are all made in Kazakhstan. Well, you would say, that's fine. That's a great excuse. It's an excuse that I don't buy, but I'm certainly not going to buy your product. Thank you very much. And you would go to another airline, and that airline would belly up. What this teacher's telling you, and I've heard this time and again, it kind of freaks me out that teachers are able to get away with this idiocy. They're admitting that they're taking our billions and trillions of dollars and putting out a poor product. Okay, so if we all agree you're putting out a poor product, why then are you putting all of your muscle, all of your political muscle, all of your tens of millions of dollars to buy senators and congressmen and the rest? Why are you forcing us to continue to buy your airplane that's crashing? Let us take our money elsewhere. You've agreed. You've admitted. We don't even have any disagreement. We can kumbaya and hug. You're putting out a horrible product. The kids aren't being educated. Thank you very much. Let me go elsewhere. But their answer is, oh, no, we all agree that the product we're putting out sucks, but we've got the power of the law to make sure that this system that puts out all of these ill-educated children remains in place so that we can continue to be compensated.
Jim, it's always follow the money. The teacher said to me, he said, then the only thing we're disagreeing on is you don't want me to make the money I make. He just totally doesn't understand. I don't care how much money he makes. I want him to make all the money he is possibly able to earn, but he has to earn it. I've got to earn it. If I don't succeed in my business, I don't earn more, I go out of business.
There we go.
And if he comes up with some... So there are teachers, for instance. One of the reasons I brought up my 1980s story about the cash register is that when I hear, in fact, I've got a conservative person on my Facebook page, great guy, says parents just need to take an active role in the education of their children. And I agree with them, except for this. The parents that we're talking about now are the parents they're the children that couldn't make cash change back on my register in the early 1980s. Those are the people that we're now saying should take an active role in educating their own when they themselves didn't have a suitable education.
You grab one generation, as Abe had suggested, one generation, and it's almost impossible to change the downward direction. And let me give you an anecdote on that. I was at a get-together, and I had run into somebody that I knew as a single mom, and she was all thrilled that her daughter had just graduated. And we were talking about how... how the quality of the education system in Muskegon County had gone down. And she looked at us, and she was a high school dropout, but she looked at us and she said, oh, I know that my daughter she gets a great education because when I went to her graduation, almost everyone got an award. and she certainly wasn't lying. She was just repeating.
My brother-in-law, he was a police officer in Pontiac, and he was going to go on to become a lawyer. And so he starts out he'd already had a 2-year certificate, 2-year associate's degree, so it wasn't going to be a big hill. He's taking Introduction to China and a bowling class. And I'm looking at what I said, what in the heck does any of this have to do with learning to be a lawyer for Oakland County, Michigan? And the answer is funding. It's always about funding. Do me a favor, folks. Stay with us. We are going to head to a break, and we'll be right back.
Okay, it's playing, but I don't hear it. Oh, because I got it. Okay, here we go. It was on. I just had a button.
I wasn't sure if you were going to segue into music or just.
I did.
Did you?
But you just couldn't hear it 'cause
Okay.
I had it on 2 instead of 3. But it did fine.
Jim, I think we do pretty damn good together.
Well, we agree. I can get, as Oscar knows, I can get as contrary as I want with even people I agree with, or
I'm okay with that. I don't have a
but
problem
I
in the
agree.
world.
But my problem with education is just like yours. I mean, it's follow the money.
To me, though, Jim, if we don't get a hold of education, everything else that we're doing is pissing in the wind.
Well,
we can't. Today's already lost. If we don't
like a
say
Jerry Jeff
tomorrow,
Walker tune.
there's nothing else to say.
Pardon me?
It's the Jerry Jeff Walker tune.
Yeah.
Pissing in the wind.
I'm going to get some water. Well, I agree, but we're not going to, and I'll tell you why.
I'll look forward to it. We'll do it on here.
And I got to tell you, nobody wishes I was wrong more than me about just about everything I say. But I know I'm right.
Use offer code Kim. You get 2 free bonus months with purchase. Carbonite.com. Offer code Kim.
Hi everyone, Jay Farner here with Quicken Loans. Today's mortgage rates are just about the lowest that we've ever experienced. But because these super low rates fluctuate, Quicken Loans has a great new way for you to find out what the current mortgage rate is for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage right this instant. Just pick up your mobile phone and text the word rates.
Probably should have this cup of coffee.
Text rates to 26293.
I can't stop myself from that stuff.
Yeah, me neither. That's a problem. 'Cause I'm trying to cut my caffeine, but
You know, and I'm trying for the last week to not put sugar in my coffee.
yeah.
Because I mean, I've picked up a lot of weight since I had open heart surgery 3 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so, but I've gained a lot of weight since I quit smoking. That's been 3 years.
Yeah.
And
I
with
quit
that,
2 years ago. I gained a lot. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we're skiing downhill, I'm afraid.
I didn't know you had heart. I didn't know you had heart surgery. That's
Yeah, and I was born with a defect, so
Okay.
I had a couple surgeries when I was very young, and then another one just a few years ago.
yeah. See, the reason I was out for so long is because, like I say, trying to find a way to do this because I had no, it's like if you had insurance, they'd do all you could do, but anyway,
Where I'm.
yeah.
Well, welcome back. You're listening to Mike Hewitt in the Renegade River Show, and today we've got Jim Riley of Eye on Muskegon with us. Jim, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
Jim, I tell you what, I wanted to touch on something real quick. I'm a little bit excited about it. We were just touching on it when we went to break, just getting there. When I said if we look forward and say we need to save America, to me, everything that we're doing is for naught if we don't get a hold of education. To me, today is already lost, and if we don't get ahead of education, we're not going to be saving tomorrow either. So what do you think? What's your take?
Well, I agree with you in that. I think education is it. In particular, as you said, our children are in 13 or more years of I call it the socialist madrasas that we call public education here. And that doesn't mean that all education is bad. And certainly most teachers, I think, do care. But the system is such that by the time too many of our children do finish their 13 or 14 or 15 years in that system, they either do not have the skills to succeed in the real world, or they have the skills, but they have such a warped view of America in that socialism is good, capitalism is bad, profits are bad, government is good, and things of that sort. So having skills, but also having a warped socialistic point of view, I think is bad for the country and the culture. But I am far more negative on any chances for change, and I'll tell you why. And this has to do with almost anything else. We know that, for instance, in particular since 9/11, we've had our airline experience has been awful. We have the TSA, we have people being patted down, We have crowded airliners. It's not a fun thing to do. I used to travel extensively in the 70s and the 80s and even in the 90s. It's much better than it is today. But in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, when people complained, things got done because the people making the complaints were, in fact, people of power. Those people in your community that had the power, the wherewithal, the articulate nature, and maybe the connection to a senator or a congressman, or at least someone who could help make things change. What happened since 9/11 was that the rich people no longer fly commercial. They are now all flying in charters. I remember we used to fly into Aspen all the time, a couple times a year. And it was really kind of cool because we'd be in Denver, and we'd wait for the shuttle from Denver into Aspen, and you'd almost always see a movie star or somebody somebody famous. You never see them anymore because they're all flying in on their own personal private charters. So the people who do have the power and the wherewithal to affect change in airlines, they don't even know what we're going through. They don't care because they're flying out of the executive area and going direct. They don't have to do all the stops and things like we do. That's the same thing with our public education system. This started decades ago, but it's even worse today. I know people have said, look, we live in Muskegon, and we're going to have to move out because there's the school systems are so poor. We want our kids to get educated, and we thought we'd be able to do it because our housing was so inexpensive, but it just costs too much not to have a school. And what's happening in the poor schools, but also in the good schools, is that those parents who really care about curriculum, those parents who would be willing to join the PTA and really make some noise about the books that are being put together for the children, the good teachers, the bad teachers, those people that have the wherewithal to affect the kind of change that would really be beneficial to their children, and, of course, all of the other children in the class and in the school, they're saying, I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to put my kid either in a better school system in a different community or in a private school. And that's why you have the President of the United States and almost all of the rich people, the powerful people in Washington, D.C. And, of course, none of their children would ever go to any of the local public schools there. They all go to schools that most people in the state of Michigan couldn't afford for college. And that's the problem. That's why I'm negative, because those folks who can go to those meetings, who would passionately argue that their schools educate their children, they're gone. They've taken their children elsewhere. But their money, of course, stays because they're taxed.
See, now, Jim, you covered so much area just now, I had to start making notes. I said, holy smokes, there's a lot on the table.
You should have known what you were getting when you invited me here. Oscar knows.
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, now, the very first thing I want to touch on is off of your list is that next week after your show, I'm going to be on an airplane heading to Las Vegas for the annual SHOT Show. And
cool.
So I'm excited about that, but the downside to it is two things. First off, do you remember the old black and white movies showing Europe during the Nazi Revolution going on? Yep. It was, your papers, please. Well, that's how I think when I'm approaching the TSA. And so it's very much, to me, right out of that European, your papers, please era. Now, to me, these things are all indoctrinal. They're purposely not, there's no hope that they're going to catch somebody that's a terrorist. None of the terrorists that have been caught were caught because of somebody feeling up an old lady. I mean, that's clearly
somebody
not
feeling up anybody.
Yeah, that's not the goal of TSA. They've not successfully thwarted a single hijacking since their invention. So if you stand back and say, okay, if that's not what their function is, because that's not the result, what are they doing? And the answer, the only one I can come up with, is just what I said. It's an indoctrinational process. We're getting used to that state of mind. Then the next thing I wanted to whine about while we're on a roll is I'm 50, almost 52 in another week or two. I'm 6'2", and I don't fit into the airplane seat anymore because I got bigger and the seat got a lot smaller. That's a problem, serious. So for me, one of the I'm not rich, so I have to travel commercial, but it's 4 miserable hours to get to Las Vegas. I don't fit in those little seats. That's a problem. But along the path, you talked about education, and one of the things I've seen that's different. And I want to kind of approach this from two angles to give you some ammunition for you. The first is that a long time ago in America, when we had little white or little red chapels for education, and you had multiple layers, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade in the same room, teachers then at least as I understand it from reading history, had more of a missionary state of mind. And there was a passion about teaching, and I think that passion is one of the things that's lacking, and not with all teachers. So I don't want to paint with a huge brush. But if the goal is really trying to maximize my income for the 7 months a year I work, that's a lot different than a missionary mentality of passion and teaching the next generation coming up. So I think the actual ideology, the agenda or the goal in our educational structure has really shifted. And the other thing that's changed...
Can I just jump in here on one point? Because you gave the example of exactly what you just said. And that was the teacher who flat out told you, I'm dealing with crappy material.
Yeah.
You saw the disdain. You heard the disdain. You had right in front of you a teacher who said, I can't teach these kids because they suck. Their parents suck. Their social situation sucks. The kids just suck. Therefore, you shouldn't even expect me to teach them to read, to write, to do the mathematics. If you go into a job with that as your attitude, an attitude that you're proud enough to use when you're talking with someone who you hardly know, think about how that taints every morning that you wake up. I'm dealing with a bunch of kids whose parents don't give a crap, and I'm still getting my $65,000 a year.
No question about it. No question. But then, to me, if you mentioned the word history earlier. I truly am an amateur historian. I love reading history whenever I can take something out of the past and relate it to where we're at. But this one I don't have to go that far back for. If you look at the black community in 1960 and measure from the end of the Civil War through that period of time on an income scale and on an educational achievement scale, all of their markings were going straight up until the war on poverty. And then all of a sudden it was a brick wall that hit. And it was through entitlements, it was through an attack on their faith, it was through an attack on their family. And then whoever was that launched that attack stood back and said, wow, that's really working good. Let's do it on everybody. And that's where we're at right now.
Well, what happened with the Great Society and the war on poverty, initiated under the Johnson administration, was...
When he wasn't busy drinking.
Well, he's a very interesting man. I've read a couple of biographies of Lyndon Johnson, but I believe his heart was in the right place, and certainly he wasn't fought by the Republicans. The Republicans, as a matter of fact, were far more aggressive in trying to make the black community, the minority community, a better place. But misguided, who knows what the ultimate motivations were. But once you start paying people to do the wrong thing, you shouldn't be shocked that they're going to do the wrong thing. And the one combo graph, if you will, that has almost identical viewing is that the collapse of the black community within the urban setting is almost identical to the breaking up of marriage. Once we encouraged black women not to marry, matter of fact, if they got married, they lost their subsidized housing, they lost their free health care, they lost their monthly or their weekly paycheck. Once we encouraged them to take all the free money and the free gifts, if only they would make sure that they don't get married, shockingly, that took off. And, of course, it's not just in the black community any longer. It's all over this country.
Yeah, what's really fascinating, because what got me on this little side tangent here is you mentioned the word competition along the path, and one of the things you were saying earlier. And at the time I wrote down the word voucher, and we can call it anything you want, but what I'm getting at is competition. And the irony to it is that in the black communities, their schools are, by my measure, worse than the rest of the American school systems.
Well, Muskegon Heights, clearly, the worst high school in the state of Michigan.
And the one thing that could most help is to bring in some competition where those children had that word I love. Give them some opportunity. Okay? If they get some opportunity, this is going to be okay. If we continue on the path that we're on, it's not going to be okay. It's just that simple. So the one thing in my mind that would work it's been repackaged in several different ways, but vouchers. And the one group that stood in the way of coming up with some kind of competitive package was the Democrat Party, the very people that claim that they're here to help people that need help. The irony of all of these things is just such a fascinating thing to me.
Well, you'll see time and again, the study after study, survey after survey says that the inner city communities, the black urban communities, are overwhelmingly, even more so than the average white in this country, they are overwhelmingly for school choice or for vouchers, the opportunity to let the parent pick the school that the child can go to. And even though the people that they elect to represent them are totally and openly against that option. So I don't know how I don't know how you connect with people who actively vote against what they say they are for.
Right.
But one of the things that we do know is that the left is quite positive on choice for a variety of things. And school choice ought to be at the top. I'm not surprised that unions have their advocates. The Democrat Party certainly is a big supporter of teachers' unions.
It's funding.
They get enormous amounts of money from it. So I in one sense, I don't blame the Democrat Party for taking that position. I do blame the Republican Party, and I have run as a Republican candidate and sadly failed. But the Republican Party has not taken that message to the inner cities. They have not said, you have been betrayed. You have opportunities out here for your children. We have left it alone. Even in our own little community here, you don't have to travel far. How many Republicans have ever really made a pitch to the citizens, the parents, the children in Muskegon Heights? How many have they even taken them? We see what happened to the teachers in Muskegon Heights. They all lost their jobs. The custodians lost their jobs. All of the people who were involved in that organization. Everyone knew it was not only going downhill, it had been named the worst high school in the state of Michigan. Remember, this is a state that includes Detroit City. It includes Flint. It includes Saginaw. We were number one in this instance, and nobody did a thing. Certainly, the Democrat community here did nothing. Republicans did nothing either.
The part of the problem to me, and it's first off, I absolutely agree with you about the Republicans. There was an opportunity for some outreach that was missed. Having said that, I've also been a candidate, and I remember, in fact, I've mentioned it on this show before. I remember very well being one of 8 Republicans, and there was a Democrat, so you had 9 candidates on a stage running for the state house in the north half of Ottawa County, and there was a debate. It was put on by the local newspaper and another organization. There was a tremendous amount of marketing in advance of this. Between the 9 candidates, some $300,000 in candidate spending had been spent during that campaign leading up to that period of time. And when you look out into the audience, there's about 100 people, which on the surface, you go, that's a pretty good turnout.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable.
But then you look and you say, okay, those 5 are with him, those 10 are with her, those 10 are with him. And once you get all done with identifying candidate campaign members and immediate family members, there were 3 or 4 concerned citizens.
Who were there actually to learn something.
Who were there? Yeah. And everybody else was there just to support the guy or the gal that they had a personal brother, sister, mother kind of relationship with. And I thought, wait a minute. At the time as a candidate, truly it was a turning point in Mike Hewitt's state of mind politically, because I thought to myself, why am I beating myself to death and spending not some big lobbyist money from Lansing? This was Mike Hewitt's money. I spent a lot of them, and listen, I don't have sour grapes. I think in that race, Arlen Meekoff won. He earned it. He worked very hard, etc. So I have no sour grapes about that. But I thought to myself at the time, why would I spend $30,000 of my own money, quit my job to do it, by the way, for 3 or 4 people that showed up out of 150,000? I looked at the other candidates on the stage. I thought, what are we, nuts? No wonder qualified, great people don't run for office.
Well, I've long lamented the conservatives and Republicans as a group, but conservatives in particular, our ability to communicate with the average American. We all know that the left and certainly many of the establishment Republicans have attempted to, and in certain cases succeeded at demonizing the Tea Party, the members of the Tea Party. And I admire to the extent that you can, something that you really despise, but I admire the groups like MoveOn.org and others who have been very successful at articulating a message and getting that message out. And we need your little story here about sitting in front of a room that appeared to be full, but I love the way you analyzed it, and it in fact just had a very few number of people who were actually interested. We on the conservative right need to come up with a way to somehow energize people. I know that, and I have great respect for you because you're, among many other things, you've decided to plunge into the radio business, as did I. I did it with the hope that we would reach people that are not being reached and getting the word out. But somehow our national Republicans have to do what the national Democrats have done, and they've embraced the new media, they've embraced the youth. Now, think about it. It's got to be a lot harder selling the message of socialism and dependency than it does selling freedom and empowerment.
Not so much, Jim. I got a thought I'm going to share with you when we come back from a break.
Oh, I wasn't listening. You can always do this.
It's okay.
I'm used to being told to shut up.
Yeah, right. And has it ever worked?
No, but I'm just used to hearing it. I won't be hurt.
Yeah.
Hey, let's exchange ads.
Absolutely. Yep, done.
Can you have his ad put on my show and my promo put on his?
Nope, done.
Can you do that, or who do I need?
Brian can do it, but yeah, I can talk to him.
Okay, I'm going. We're leaving first thing tomorrow morning, so I'll be going all week if you get a chance.
Kim Commando here, and go to my PC.
Kim Commando.
Just make sure his ad tells what time his is.
Yeah, I don't know that it does or not. So Brian can give me a
We'll
call.
find out here in a sec. Your ad or your promo ad?
Well, just something that if they hear it on my show, they know.
Yeah.
Oh,
can listen.
promo ad then.
Yeah. I'll get with Brian
Well,
during
I
the
don't
week.
care. Promo ad, but an ad for his store, too. That works.
Yeah, either one's fine.
I mean, I've got ads that I'm not filling. I'd rather fill them with...
I think you've got two on there. I don't know that either one of them is an actual promo ad for this spot, for this space.
Yeah, but his ad would be fine, too. I mean, I've got 7 minutes that I'm not filling. So I'd love to put that on.
What the heck were we just talking about on the air? What were you saying?
I haven't got a fucking clue.
I just drew a flat blank. I turned around and prepare my thoughts again. What were we talking about, Oscar?
I just drew blank.
Well, you are the youngest guy in the room, and shit.
Yeah, you are. Yeah,
I'm pretty high mileage, though.
You said you had some thoughts you were going to come back with. I remember that part. But
Yeah, but I have no idea what they were, Oscar.
Oh, that's funny.
Shit, what were you talking? I can rewind this and stop and rewind it.
Shit, that's terrible.
Well, I have a problem when I say, after the break we're going to come back, and then I haven't got a freak out. I did that like 3 times today.
Yeah.
And I was sort of able to remember a little teeny little thread, but not much.
That's terrible.
Hey, but I'll tell you this. I used to fly a lot in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and it is funny how, well, you experience it today, but especially that Aspen flight. I mean, you'd get at O'Hare or Denver, because it used to be a direct flight from O'Hare. You'd see all sorts of... Is that us?
No, I got weather here first.
Okay, you'd see all sorts of prominent people. Now it's just... It's essentially, it's poor people flying on this flight to Aspen.
The only thing we're missing is the Hispanic-speaking pilot and chickens on the benches beside us.
You got 15 seconds.
Well, welcome back. You're listening to Mike Hewitt and the Renegade River Show, and today we're on with Jim Riley, who's from Ion, Muskegon. Jim, I got to tell you, we had a really good roll going, and I'm not sure I know where we're at, but I know where I'm going to pick up.
There we go.
One of the things you mentioned along the path was the evil word prophet.
Oh, God, that really sends people running for the tall grass.
Right where I wrote prophet down, there are still lightning bolts and skulls and crossbones and all kinds of stuff on here. Hey, one of the things I find fascinating about prophet, the difference in the state of mind between the left and the right. Of course, I think our side's right, and I think they're wrong, and I'm sure they'll look at me and shake their head in disgust. But when I look at my own business model, if I really, really can dial in Renegade River, I'm going to have a net profit of around 1.5%. if I really, really dial it up tight. And then when I compare that to the government, the last time I saw the math on it, not state, but the federal government was operating at an 87% administrative cost. And I think to myself, is that really where I want to put my money at? If I'm really trying to help the average person on the street that needs some help, and rightfully so may need some help, do I want to be able to go over and give them $10, or do I want to go over and say, I hope you got my 13 cents? I just can't get my head around the idea that there's someone that can stand back and logically look at the bureaucracy in D.C. and say those are the people that care about us, the unionized. And I'm not making a union statement when I say it. I'm talking about people that don't have to worry about customer satisfaction, don't have to worry about fiscal responsibility. They're just in there punching a card for 40 hours a week, and they're 750 miles away, and they're making way more money than me, whether they solve my problem or not. Nothing about that seems to ring with logic to me. How about you?
Well, I agree, and I think it goes deeper than the three of us here in this room would imagine, primarily because most people don't have a clue what their local politicians do. As a matter of fact, I did a survey a while back just trying to find out if people knew, number one, who their county commissioner was, and name one thing that the county commission did. And I couldn't find... I think I had one out of like 50 knew who their county commissioner was, but I couldn't find anybody who could come up with anything that they knew what the county commission did. And I think it's somewhat the same at the national level. When we have who I think is a pretty good guy, Bill Huizenga, who's our congressman, and we've got two U.S. senators here. And I think people may understand what our governor does, because our governor, be it Granholm or Snyder, does in fact do things. But nationally, most people don't know what they do. We know the FBI catches bad guys and the CIA kills, Obama, and the military does certain things. Most people don't understand how big it is and how expensive it is, and in good measure, because we're not paying for it. We are, in fact, if we were paying the taxes for what our federal government was costing us, or here even in Muskegon County, if we were paying the taxes that would actually cover what they're spending and promising in benefits, we would probably do something about it. But both the federal government and the state and local governments have come up with this little scam of making massively expensive promises for retiree pensions, retiree benefits, all sorts of investments that they make today that have all sorts of expenses down the road. And these are giant promises that we're not paying for right now, but at some point someone's going to have to pick up. So is it fixable? You know what? I don't think it is, because number one, we don't know what they do, and we don't really care what they do. And you've seen the man on the street questions. Have you been? Do you know what the physical cliff is? And one of the responses was, "Well, we just moved to New York from New Mexico. No, so we don't know what it is." So many people don't have a clue. They don't even listen to the news ever.
No, they don't. I had probably about a year ago, I had a fella who was a state representative from somewhere in the southern, almost to the Ohio border, other side in southern. And at any rate, he's on Facebook with me, and he was debating. No, he really wasn't debating me. He was chastising me because I was whining at the time on my Facebook page about the lack of public involvement. Is what I was talking about. You mentioned when you go to a school board meeting, there's virtually nobody there. I've maintained that if part of the curriculum of high school was what we made our a class sit through at least 1 week of a courthouse going through, I don't care if it's civil or prosecutorial process. I think our courts are the most broken branch of government, and let's get our kids to understand by having them see it. But my point is that I think that our society was set up for public engagement, and I don't see that happening. So this guy takes me on. He says that's nonsense. This is a Republican form of government, which means you shouldn't have to worry about these things. And so that's the other state of mind. Why are you involved in showing up at our meeting when this is a Republican form? I'm here to represent you. What do you think of that?
Well, let's face it. People who are elected don't really want to hear what the people who elected them have to say. And I do think it's beyond broken. I really do. I'm not sure it's fixable. I know that one of the complaints, and you talk about taking the students to the courts, and I'm sure there's some value in it, but I really believe, and I'd love to see history and science and all these other wonderful things in schools made available, and certainly for those youngsters who have shown the ability to really study hard, that's fine. But the problem that American businesses, we're finding this here in Muskegon County, a contributory reason why companies won't move into our county is we have a hard time providing qualified young people or people of any age for work. And some of the minimums that I know that we were told at a county commission meeting, one of the bigger employers in the county said that they have, I think, 3 requirements, and because of that, they're having a hard time hiring people. You had to be a high school graduate, you had to have a clean criminal record, and you had to pass a drug test, which included marijuana. And they, in a county of 170,000 with massively high unemployment, not just high school kids, but adults, they were having a hard time finding people. And I would say that, to me, if our schools would refocus, which I don't believe they will, and this is why big companies have total retraining. They bring these kids in. But if they would refocus on the reading, writing, arithmetic, and one other thing, and that is promptness and respect for authority. And I'll just give a little anecdote. Years ago, I did a junior achievement. I just did one class. It wasn't junior achievement, but it was something like that. And it was at the Muskegon Heights. I believe it was either junior high or one of the early grades in high school. I got to the school before the class. Let's say the class was 11 o'clock. I waited in the hall. The bell rang. All the kids came out. I went in. There was a very nicely dressed black teacher. He had his coat and tie on. He was clearly a caring and intelligent teacher. We're talking during the break. The bell rings. We're the only 2 people in the class. He says, "Excuse me." He goes out. I follow him out. And all the teachers are in the hall, kind of like encouraging the kids to get into the class and into their seats. A good 10 minutes after the bell rang, the kids were settled down and ready to go. Now, 2 horrible things were there, which I'm not sure if he was aware of or not, but I most certainly was. Number one, these kids were getting 5 to 10 minutes less education per class than the kids over in Norton Shores. And more importantly, they were being taught that being on time, that the bell ringing meant 5 or 10 minutes after it rang. So these young people, when they graduated from high school, and they went to their first job, and let's say it was McDonald's, and they said you got to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you show up at 8:05 or 8:10 and you get canned, you don't have a clue, because you know that 8 o'clock means 5 or 10 minutes. That's okay. So our children, in too many instances, and not purely, by the way, in the urban areas, but they are not being taught. You've got to be on time. You have to be responsible, and your boss. You have to have respect for your boss, and they're not doing that. You
know what's funny about some of the things you were listing, like the difference in general attitude of private versus the school system. One of the assistant principals from this high school where my daughters all graduated from told me, first he wanted to know, how many daughters do you have? Because he was tired of seeing me in there. It seems like the administrators, while they want to, on one hand, say parents aren't engaged, on the other hand, they're not real thrilled when they see engaged parents.
No, they're not.
Yeah. Not at all, because I'm in there wrinkling their world and changing it and challenging it.
Yes.
But he went on to explain to me, Mike, this is not real life here. What do you think this is? And I thought, wow, do you ever think about what you're going to say before you say it? Because that's what we're trying to raise these children up to be responsible citizens that can make a contribution to their own futures and to society in general. But you talked about dress code along with the things you were saying, and before I opened Renegade River, I've managed other businesses and businesses of my own, and I would run an ad for either entry-level work or for a lot of times mid-level management, and people would come in like they're on their way to the beach. And I think, honest, really, that's how you're dressed to come look for a job that's a well-paying, responsible community position. Honest, that's what you're going to do. I remember one fella came in and he was writing on his paper that he had worked for a Chrysler store. as if Christ may have been in the automobile business at one point or another.
Had that been the case, Chrysler's probably would have been a little more reliable.
Maybe. But the worst part about it is he's writing it while sitting at a desk where the desk itself has got Chrysler logo on it, and he's doing it with a huge front showroom window with a big, gigantic Chrysler sign in front of him. So I always said that when I hired young people, before I could teach them, I had to teach them to learn, because so far they've been taught to memorize. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is funding. The schools are chasing funding. And in that case, shame on both political parties, because that should have nothing to do with what we're after. They build a $50 million complex and say we have a funding problem. No kidding. And then the last thing that I'm on my little rant that I wanted to touch on is one of the things I wanted to kind of correct myself that I'd said earlier, and it dovetails with something you said a moment ago, is when we're talking about the elected politicians. I don't want to imply when I said no wonder that good and qualified people don't run. People like Bill Huizenga. He's been a guest on my show. He's been a friend of mine for a few years. He's a nice guy. I think he's pretty passionate about what he does. I think he tries. I don't agree with him on everything, but I've never met anybody that I agree with on everything, so I don't know that that's a disqualifier. But what I find fascinating about the public in general, and it dovetails with what my ringing every time theme is that if you go to, I know Ottawa County's representative, so bear with me up here a little bit, but if you go to Amanda Price's district hours meeting, there's one or two people that show up, and they're the same people that were there the last time. If you go to Arlen Meekoff, who's a state senator, he's got a huge geography that he covers. And it's the same thing. You might get four or five people that show up to his district hours meetings. And I tell you that because two things I want you to chew on. The first is that most of these elected officials are trying to reach out, and there's nobody reaching back. That's a real disconnect. The other thing is that populist rhetoric calls us to bash the elected officials, but they're the elected officials that we elected, and therefore, in my mind, whether we like what we're seeing or not, they're a perfect reflection of we the electorate. Ted Kennedy, in my mind, I think the guy's a murderer. I thought he was terrible. He's passed away now, so I'm not picking on him that way, but he's an easy common denominator. Everyone knows who I'm referring to. They elected him year after year, decade after decade.
Kwame Kilpatrick. And when you start looking, Mary Young, when you start looking at these people. Marion Barry, the cokehead, and you start saying to yourself, wait a minute now. It's hard to rag on those people when we, the people, the electorate, we're electing them people.
Yeah.
And so when I say they're a perfect reflection of the electorate, if we don't like what we're seeing, in my mind, it goes to my opening point, and that is we've got to get a hold of our educational structure, because we've got to change what they're reflecting. We've got to change ourselves, or we're going to see a really, really rough tomorrow. That's my point.
Well, let's see if your show and my show, which is, by the way, on Sundays from 8:30 to 10, if we can get the word out. We need people. We've complained quite a bit on this little hour show, and as I do on my show. I would really like to see us starting to come up with some answers. And, of course, the biggest answer, which is what you just attended to, which is the politicians are there, but if the people aren't going to bother to call them to show up, to get engaged at all, they're going to get what they deserve.
No question. Jim Riley, thanks for joining the Renegade River Show, and thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks so much. Well, I really enjoyed that.
I thought that was a lot of fun.
Anytime, let me know. I'm happy. I like being on the radio, and I like it. We've got to figure out how to get the message out. We just got to, because I know I talked to Oscar, and I know Oscar and I may vote for different people, but I know that Oscar and I we have pretty much similar points of view.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you on that point, though, I don't have any idea what your ideology. It made no difference to me, but when I was younger. And this is a political party statement and not an individual statement. I used to think that we all wanted the same results, we just had a different path of getting there. And I'm not convinced that that's the case on a party level anymore.
Right.
So
no, and of course you've got a situation. You have this really odd situation in Ottawa County where Democrats are running as Republicans because that's the only possible way to get elected, and we have Republicans who, for whatever reason, who are Democrats. Or Democrats who run as Republicans.
But like his statement, his early statement too, Mike's statement about the people that